What's up, y'all? We back with another one, man. Hope everyone having a blessed one. Today we got Murder Trial Takes a Jaw-Dropping Turn. Season 1, Episode 2, The Menendez Murders. Erik tells all. I'm actually watching a Netflix show about this right now, off stream and stuff. Let's get into this one right here.
I'm sorry, kill my parents.
Violent things don't happen in Beverly Hills. They just don't. It was shocking.
Everything was colliding at that moment, and my brother said,
this was it, and they were going to kill us.
and I just felt chills over my body.
I've been in this business for over 33 years, and I've heard of very few murders that were more savage than this one was.
What I had done was I just wanted to undo it. I just wanted to go back in time. I didn't want this moment to be real.
The police began to focus on the boys as possibly the killers.
The police were making it clear that they felt that we were involved. And just to be candid, I was acting like a guilty person. I had to tell someone what I had done. So I went to Dr. Oziel.
It was a very intense meeting. Oziel telling me that I seemed menacing to him.
Nothing is more fundamental to the Menendez brothers case than the outrage perpetrated by Oziel. Nothing.
Today at approximately 1:20 p.m., Beverly Hills police detectives arrested Joseph Lyle Menendez, 22, for the August murders of his mother and father, Maria Louise Kitty Menendez and Jose Enrique Menendez. His brother, Erik Galen Menendez, 19, also wanted for the same crimes, is being sought, is believed to be out of the country.
I was in Israel playing on the lower circuit of the Pro Tour in tennis, trying to build up a ranking from a person that I knew in Los Angeles. And he said, I don't know how to tell you this, but your brother's been arrested. And he said, it's all over the news here. My thought was at that point is I got to get back to Lyle. It never crossed my mind to run away. I could have.
Erik, it turns out, was in Israel at a tennis tournament with his tennis coach. And Lyle's uncle, Carlos Baralt, said, please don't extradite him. I will get him back. I will get him back immediately.
I was in Tel Aviv and using my passport, bought a plane ticket, and I assumed that would pop up on the computer screen. As it turned out, that did not happen. I remember flying into Miami, and that's when I was met with my Aunt Marta and my cousin Andy and a Miami detective. I went on the plane with my cousin Andy, not the detective, no police officers, nobody. And I flew to Los Angeles with Andy. I told him what happened. We had a special connection. We were like brothers, which were the last few hours that I was able to spend free, which turned out to be very precious moments in my life because Andy would later die in 2003. I knew that I was going to be arrested and sent to jail. There was a firestorm happening in Los Angeles, and they were waiting for me, and that's where I was headed. And I knew that I would no longer be in control of anything that happened to me. I'm Erik Menendez. I'm speaking to you from the Donovan Correctional Facility in California near the Mexican border. I'm serving a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. I've heard many different versions of my life told in the media, and those stories are fiction. I think it's time people hear the truth from my own words without
They could have got away with it if it weren't for him.
the restrictions of a courtroom. You may think you know my story, but really you couldn't possibly, because I'm telling it to you now for the first time.
Were arrested. It was shocking.
When they were both arrested, the first thought was, oh my God. And then, oh my God. Sort of a second thought was, wow, maybe the pieces fit here.
I promise you, everyone was stunned. There was nobody who said, I figured that from the beginning. Nobody.
Yo, their mama and daddy was their daddy, mama, whatever. I think it's their daddy. He was the owner of the Hertz rental company. I think he the one who made it and shit. If you want the owner, then if he want the one that made it, then for sure he brought it. He was the CEO of the Hertz company. I don't know if he was the founder or not, but I know he was the CEO. They was getting that money like crazy go out.
I was in the back of the police car, and Detective Zoller and Lenahan were driving me to the Los Angeles County Jail. They actually said that they regretted that I had to go there because they were worried that I wouldn't make it to trial. That's how dangerous the place was. The Los Angeles County Jail was packed with some of the most violent criminals of the day. When you first enter it, it actually looks like a dark nightmare. It's dirty. It smells like urine. At night, rats come out. Literally, these large rats, they take over. Then you hear screams. You hear screams echoing through the halls of people being beaten. You hear people being tortured. You hear people being assaulted in other cells or raped. In quiet, you'll hear just people start crying. So you hear sobbing. My first week there, the guy 3 cells down from me hung himself. Dr. Vickery was coming to visit me in the county jail and trying to basically save my life. Many of my thoughts were simply suicide. Emotionally, I was collapsing.
My impression of Erik during my first hours that I spent with him was that he was so distraught, he was so emotional, he was so depressed that he would break down and start sobbing at any discussion about his family that even involved me asking simple background questions about his parents. My impression of Erik was, boy, this kid is a mess.
And so Dr. Vickery was there, I think, just about every week, and I pretty much just spent the whole time just crying.
For months and months, all he did was tell me how wonderful his parents were, how his mother was heroic in her own history, and his father was a heroic figure and came from a heroic family.
Jose Menendez was a Cuban refugee who came to this country with nothing, just with the clothes on his back.
The Menendez family history was told over and over and over again to Lyle and I. The legend and the stories that my father was eager to tell were of the extraordinary story of my family's rise in Cuba to a kind of almost like a nobility state, where my grandmother was this Olympic swimmer that had won medals in the Panama Olympics, and my grandfather was a national soccer star, and they were this power couple in Cuba, and they had this terrific sort of fairy tale life. When Castro eventually betrayed the country and executed 600 people, their homes were raided, and they were under the threat of being imprisoned, and so they had to escape the country. And when they escaped the country, one at a time, they had to leave everything behind.
Top 4 reasons why I got the Pro-Colored F13 BTF printer. Number 1, on-demand printing. No minimum amounts. If I only need one design for one item, it's quick and easy to do. Number 2, it works in a variety of fabrics, cotton, polyester, linen, etc. Number 3, no color limit to the designs. I can print as much color on the design as I want. Number 4, it's very quick.
He's now in Midwest America. He's alone. He doesn't look like everyone else. He doesn't speak like everyone else. So he's derided. Now, my mother is a senior, and she is just the opposite of my father. She's very popular. She works for the television, for the whole, for the university and the communications department. She's a good-looking woman, and she's outgoing, and she's charismatic. I think that my mother represented to my father everything that he wanted to be in America. My mother was attracted to my father because my father represented this kind of mysterious Latin figure that was also very focused on her.
They got married in '63, and they came to Arizona to visit, and that was when I met him. Kitty loved him, I loved him, and that was all that mattered. My brothers and my father were unhappy that he wasn't Caucasian, perhaps. Once he started making money, everything looked better to them.
It was a mission on his part, that he had to become the richest, the most powerful, with the most beautiful sons, with the most beautiful wife, he was going to accomplish everything.
Jose.
That boy, which one it was? Them niggas looking like, oh, this one, he had a fake headpiece. Like, that shit was fake.
Told me a number of times the thing that was the scarring thing in his life was he worked as a dishwasher at the 21 Club. And that job, in which he sensed his terrible fall from a solid upper middle class life to that kind of position, never ever got over it.
With Jose, it was only work. Every time he came to town, somebody got fired. And he was just a no emotion type of guy.
He was this radically determined person, and he had this almost a delusional self-confidence.
Jose Menendez is chairman of the board, president, and chief executive officer of Live Entertainment, joining us here in Los Angeles. And I should point out, this is the company, folks, that brings you the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles video, which seriously is a hot video right now.
It is. So the company is broad-based, and it provides pretty much what the consumer wants.
Mm-hmm. And you must have projections for down the road what you're expecting to make at some point.
But we think 1989 will be a tremendous year.
He was not the most popular person in the entertainment industry, and he was ruthless. I think that is the word for Jose. He was known for being ruthless, and he was ruthless with his kids. He could have whatever he wanted, except the love of his sons. And that was what killed him.
In Los Angeles, two brothers have pleaded innocent.
First, the Menendez brothers.
The Menendez brothers.
If the little brother never said nothing, they could have got away with it. No bullshit.
Accused of murder.
He had to talk to somebody. Nigga, you could have talked to your brother, nigga.
Murdering their parents in Beverly Hills.
It was the trial of the century.
The Menendez case was a real shocker.
It was sensational almost from day one.
The Menendez murder case has become so sensational that every development in it becomes the center of public fascination.
The Menendez brothers. The media goes wild, puts them on the cover of People magazine and makes heroes out of them.
The Menendez trial was classic human drama.
The world was riveted to it.
The Menendez trial launched Court TV.
There will be a television camera in the courtroom.
Cameras were all over.
It was just a spectacle.
Were you shocked to hear that Mr. Menendez was murdered and by his own sons, possibly?
Beyond belief. It's beyond belief.
This was supposed to be a slam dunk case.
Guilty, guilty, guilty. There was those kinds of cases where it kind of felt like a jury would go into the jury room, say that, and come right back out and say it.
As a jury, you were aware of why they were there, and they had confessed. It wasn't ever a question of finding whether they were guilty or not. You knew that was a given.
The real explosion of media became so overwhelming that I was in shock. I was being portrayed as a monster, someone who would kill for money. When I first came into the arraignment, I was so nervous, and so I walked out there, and Leslie made a joke, and it was so nerve-wracking that I smiled, and it was this defense mechanism that came out. But on the cameras, from then until the rest of eternity, have me smiling as if I think the whole thing is a joke. And ironically, exactly the opposite of how I felt, because behind the scenes, I can't stop crying. I'm on massive doses of antidepressants, and I just want to die. Instead, what's portrayed is this arrogant kid who thinks that this is all a joke, and who does he think he is, and what an awful person. And it's exactly the opposite of what was actually happening.
Erik Galen Menendez, how do you plead?
I'm guilty, Your Honor.
Because the media attention became so extreme, There was no reconciling the trial with the district attorney. It became a fight with the Los Angeles County District Attorney's office that wouldn't normally have happened.
Erik was out on the lawn weeping in agony.
That's your characterization of it, not mine.
We had a number of high-profile trials, and we had pretty much lost them all. And so each time a new one came up, one would end, we'd lose, a new one would come up, and we were like, oh my God.
Both juries are present. Good morning to you all, ladies and gentlemen. And we're ready to resume with the trial.
Judge Weisberg was a prominent judge in Los Angeles, Superior Court judge. He was a former prosecutor. He had presided over the McMartin trial.
Through more than 2.5 years on trial, Raymond Buckey and his mother, Peggy McMartin Buckey, sat accused of horrendous acts of child abuse. In the end, the jury reached a verdict on 52 charges.
We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the very defendants not guilty.
He was also the presiding judge over the Rodney King beating trial of the 4 officers that were accused of beating Rodney King, and then the 4 officers were acquitted. And that sparked widespread looting and riots and burning in Los Angeles. And he became pretty famous for that.
There was just a lot of concern that we in Los Angeles were all flakes and we couldn't convict anybody.
The DA's office needed vindication, and the Menendez brothers case looked to them to be a slam dunk.
But when you're the prosecutor, when you get a high-profile case where, you're the shizzle in that office, to get that kind of case means you've made it. The case went to Lester Kuriyama and Pam Bozanich.
Pam Bozanich was an excellent lawyer. She was absolutely convinced that these young men should be convicted of murder.
This is the woman who gave birth to them. This is what they did to their mother.
Let's be honest. In our Los Angeles County, most murder cases, prosecutors easily win. They're the tough ones, and Pam in particular was known as being tough.
The time you had the conversation with Erik Menendez, was there anything about it that made you think you should go run and write it down for later reference?
The judge determined they would have to have 2 juries. Each boy would be tried separately, in essence. And Jill was chosen to represent Lyle, and Leslie represented Erik. They were an interesting team, Leslie and Jill, because Jill was elegant, almost patrician, subdued.
He's anxious, he's frightened. It's very difficult to be facing a trial where your life is at stake.
Leslie, on the other hand, was very fierce, very articulate, and she dominated the courtroom when she was talking to a jury.
Ms. Abramson for the defense.
Good afternoon.
I remember when Leslie came in, she's a whirlwind, high energy, eccentric personality, very smart, talking a mile a minute, just larger than life personality. And it became...
She'll fuck around and make a killer look good, no bullshit.
Really clear from just meeting her for 5 minutes that this is someone who will fight for you.
Leslie Abramson.
Surprised he doesn't just take out a rifle in the courtroom and shoot him.
That's a fascinating theory.
Well, fascinating or not, that's what happened.
Well, I object to it.
We called her a ball cutter. She was tenacious, she was a good lawyer, and she was intimidating, and she scared people.
Isn't that what happened?
Miss Abramson, I'm
Is that what happened?
She was very nurturing, she was compassionate, but she was also very tough. Leslie Abramson is a tough person. She's got a huge heart, but she's very strong. And so there was a lot of accountability with her, not a lot of excuses and excuse making. She was motherly, but sort of like a tough mother bear.
I admit to an enormous bias in favor of this client.
If I ever got in trouble, if I ever got accused of murder, I'd want her to defend me.
It's been about 3 to 4 years after we were arrested that the first trial began. It was just a long sort of waiting periods in the Los Angeles County Jail.
I'll now turn to the lawyers, and they may make their opening statements.
The evidence will show that Erik Menendez is guilty of premeditated and deliberate murders of Mary and Jose Menendez.
There is no issue as to who killed Jose and Mary Louise Menendez. Why they were killed is what the focus of all of our evidence will be on.
Who was the person that was shot? My mom and my dad.
The prosecution went first and made the case that they had killed their parents for money.
The defendants lied a great deal before they were caught. What makes you think they would stop lying now?
These two men did it for selfish financial reasons.
Did you consider his intelligence and his acting in evaluating the truthfulness of the information that he gave you about what had happened to him?
I took that into consideration, yes.
Did you reject those?
Yes, essentially, yes.
They cared about their sons. They might not have been perfect, but they were human beings and they had the right to live.
The whole prosecution strategy was to show that the reason for the killings was that they thought that their father was going to disinherit them.
We had a pretty good case.
They just kept saying the same old phrases over and over.
And what was the phrase?
Oh my God, oh my God.
What was the cause of death?
Multiple shotgun wounds.
And what was the mode of death?
Homicide.
We had their spending.
Remember about how much this automobile cost?
Between $60,000 and $70,000.
Now, I believe you indicated you did other shopping. What kind of shopping did you do with them aside from homes and vehicles?
We went clothes shopping. He bought suits and shoes.
We had the record of sale of the shotguns that we thought they used.
It's a Mossberg 12-gauge shotgun. It's a pump-action shotgun, and it has an 18.5-inch barrel and is capable of holding a total of 6 12-gauge shot shells.
The break in the case had come from a woman by the name of Judalon Smith. She said, I have some information about this guy that was treating me, and he turned out to be my boyfriend, and he was also the psychologist for the Menendez brothers.
Erik unburdened himself to Dr. Oziel, and he in turn to Judalon Smith, and that was, as you know, what caused them to ultimately be arrested.
Seeing Dr. Oziel, I was falling apart, and I needed extensive help and therapy. I had huge weights of guilt and remorse, and I just broke down and I told him what I had done. When I went to him, he was married with children, but he was having an affair with this woman, Judalon Smith, and he would tell her things that his clients talked to him about.
She fed enough information that we knew that there were tapes.
He's recording their therapy sessions without the consent of the patient. You cannot do that. This is confidential. And everything a patient is telling you is privileged communication.
If you otherwise fit the definition of patient, and they fit the definition of therapist, what you tell them is like talking to God. It is sacrosanct.
Then he has his mistress, who I believe was also a patient of his, standing at the door and listening in on their therapy sessions. And then she gets pissed off and calls the police when he breaks up with her.
She wanted, I guess you'd call it revenge.
Because he told Judalon Smith he was facing disbarment if he didn't specifically say that he was afraid of Lal and I. There was a clause in the law that said if he claims that he was afraid, then he could legally divulge that to another person.
A state court ruled that audio tapes made while the Menendez brothers were undergoing therapy could be admitted as evidence in their murder trial.
It went back and forth for a while in the court. They finally were allowed to admit the evidence of the recordings, which were wrong to begin with, because the doctor-patient privilege had been violated or nullified because Lyle had threatened the psychologist.
And could you please describe his demeanor when he came into the office where you and Erik were?
He was extremely upset, threatening, menacing.
So the only legal reason he could give for doing that is to say that he was afraid, but he was never, ever afraid or threatened.
And what did he respond to you when you said that you did not choose to live your life in fear?
He said, "Neither did my father."
Nothing upset me more about the Menendez brothers case than the admission of the Oziel tapes and the behavior of Jerry Oziel. When Erik was burdened so heavily with what was on his mind, he went to the one person he thought he could trust, his psychologist. The idea that Dr. Oziel got on the witness stand and talked about that confidential communication outrages me. It's indefensible.
It just really pisses me off that somebody could do this. Somebody could violate the privacy and the safety of their patient. That idea that they should never tell anybody anything, it was proven to them.
You could tell his shit fake. He was washing his hair in the jail toilet and shit. He was too mad he couldn't get that bitch to stick.
You wound up moving your unstable girlfriend into your family home for 3 months, starting in December, didn't you?
Would you like to ask me why?
No, I would like to ask you what I would like to ask you, and that's what I just asked you. Now, can you answer
Okay,
it?
let's not argue.
There were good lessons to learn from what Leslie did. Most prosecutors are used to defense lawyers stipulating or being conciliatory to the experts, not her.
And after all, you dictated these notes. These are all your words, correct?
It was such a crazy, crazy case. When the Menendez brothers and those sweaters, I like to know the science behind the sweaters. You know, we always thought, oh yeah, they're dressing them up to look like Joe College.
Now looking back on it, okay, yeah, maybe the sweaters were a little too much, but I get the idea. You were trying to make them look like, you know, everyday kids.
For us, they were butchers. They were just spoiled, rotten kids who loved money more than they loved their parents.
I started receiving letters from people, and then there would be people outside the courtroom with signs, either for me or against me. It was just too much for me to sort of cope with in my brain.
I was really surprised at kind of the groupies that have been here for a while.
I'm kind of obsessed with the trial. It's a real interesting trial, and I want them to be acquitted.
I think they're really cute.
Not being on the jury and not being their lawyer, there's a limit to what I can do other than show my support.
I wrote one letter to Erik. Generally, the letter was, I support you. I feel sorry for what you're going through. I believe in your testimony. We started a communication through letter writing through the trial. He was telling me about how they put him on Xanax and how stressed he was about how the trial was going.
I was being portrayed as someone who would kill for money, someone who had no empathy or had a disregard for the lives of my parents. These were horrible, horrible things. And the truth of what happened wasn't being told. And I had to get used to simply being the villain, and there was nothing I could do about it. If you can imagine the worst moment of your life, the one moment you want to undo and would give your own life to go back in time and change, suddenly becoming the center of a media storm was horrifying. What was surreal and bizarre was to be reading a newspaper and there'd be an article about Lyle and I, some of which was simply false.
The LA Times sensationalized this case. I read their stories. I read them every single day. I couldn't believe it. It was not objective. It was overtly slanted against the Menendez brothers.
If you're portrayed as a greedy, arrogant, playboy, bastard kid, then that's what you're going to be seen as, and that's how you're going to be judged. That was the narrative, and that was the narrative I was seeing, this persona of me being portrayed. I didn't like the persona of Erik Menendez.
They did take certain actions that brought this upon themselves. They're not entirely victims here. In fact, they're more perpetrators than victims. They consider that they took 2 lives.
They were known as the boys throughout the trial, even though they actually went into their 20s by the time the trial was over.
Boys are not supposed to be victims.
At 18, you're not a boy. You're not a child. You're not this young little victim, basically.
The people of the state of California rest their case in chief against defendant Erik Menendez.
Everyone thinks the case is going pretty well. But, I mean, I know Leslie, and I know how good she is. So I was just wondering, said, is it really? But there's nothing I could do at this point.
Why would you spend hours and hours on hold with your insurance when you could get a free premium legal team?
I don't believe that there is any such thing as an all-American family. What the facade is, it has nothing to do with what's really going on inside. Every family has a secret. It just depends on how bad that secret really is.
At some point, I think Leslie fully understood everything that happened and the trauma that has happened in my life and just built up a presentation for a jury about the most horrible stuff of my life.
Between the ages of 6 and 18, my client, Erik Menendez, was sexually molested by his father. If a boy, even a teenage boy, is being sexually molested, is it his fault?
Wow, they went there on Pops. God damn. I mean, that's crazy, but Pops is really touching that boy. That's fucked up, Pops. But if Pops won't, he ain't have to go there on Pops. Like, y'all fucked up. Y'all niggas thought what y'all want in the will. Y'all killed the fam. Y'all seen the will. And y'all two was the only name on that motherfucker. Y'all should have found the will first, nigga.
It was a very strange case, unlike anything that we had seen in LA. It was the first case to bring out what I call America's dirty little secret of child sexual abuse in upper-class families.
The big question was, do you believe him? I mean, I think people were really surprised by the defense in this case.
What mattered in the trial, I think the only thing that mattered was what happened that week that caused me to be so terrified that I could ever pull that trigger. And so to get there, to understand how I could think this, who's going to tell that story?
This family was living the American dream, but all of a sudden, this American dream was just a facade.
I have tried, but I can't remember one time when I ever saw Kitty and Jose hug each other. They would pose for pictures. They put on the airs of being this great, happy, well-together family. Inside, there was threatening, there was yelling. I lived with them for over a year. I couldn't take it anymore.
So I wished I never lived with them because I wouldn't have known that behind the doors scenario was going on in that house.
My bedroom was downstairs and there were 2 single beds, and Lyle came downstairs one night, it was before bedtime, and wanting to sleep in.
Cuzzo wildin'. Cuzzo ass lying like a motherfucker.
The other bed. And he said that he was afraid that his dad was going to come into his room, that he and his dad had been touching each other down there. And he indicated his groin area. So I went to get Kitty and I told her what was going on. She didn't say anything. She just took him by the arm and took him back upstairs and took him back to his bedroom, and that was it. Kitty and Jose were like king and queen. And so it was just not in my head to second guess what they did.
What I experienced while living with them was kind of strange. One time I went into their room. I was talking with Lyle, and as I'm sitting on the bed, I'm looking, and under the bed is a Tupperware container. What the hell is that for? And Lyle then goes, "No, don't touch that. Oh, that's too late. I'm not gonna." I just went over and I grabbed it out. And to my dismay, it was a Tupperware container that had feces in it. And I looked over at him, I said, "What the f is this?" He looked at me and he says, But when I get nervous, I don't want to go take a bathroom or tell Mom I have to go to the bathroom, so I just go to the bathroom and I just close it up. I'm like, what the f?
You learn don't talk about what goes on in this home. And the reason is that climate of secrecy, and these families often are isolated, so they don't have a sense of even what's normal.
The trauma that both of the brothers suffered not only involved verbal and psychological humiliation and hypercriticism. Erik told me it involved physical abuse at times, but there was something more going on as well.
Lyle and I had fought so hard to keep the secrets from coming out. When I was first molested, it was by Lyle. He would take me out to the woods, and he would have me bend over, and he would stick things in me. He was an abuser, a bullier, and he hurt me.
My father would fondle me, and he would ask me to do the same with him, and I would touch him, and we would undress. He used a toothbrush and some sort of shaving utensil brush. In the bedroom, we'd have what we called object sessions, and just slide my pants down or take my pants off. He'd have a tube of Vaseline and he'd rape me. I took Erik out to the woods. I took a toothbrush also, and I played with Erik in the same way. And I'm sorry.
Lyle was just modeling.
In the same way. And I'm sorry.
Lyle was just modeling behavior that he had experienced. This occurred when they were very, very young, and they didn't quite fully understand what was right and what was wrong, and they didn't know it was wrong at the time. Lyle was mimicking what his father had done to him.
It was about 6 to 8 months of work with him before it started to come out in a very halting, limited way. Erik said the father began touching their genitals, and this made the brothers uncomfortable. But Erik didn't know what to make of it. He thought that this was normal because his father said, this is all normal. This is part of helping you be a better athlete, helping you to relax, and so forth.
This house in Muncie, that's where a lot of the bad stuff began to happen in my life. The scariness and the violence for me as a child began in that house and in the forest outside that house. Drugs had started when I was 6. At the time, I actually saw it as just the opposite. I saw it as a way of my dad expressing that he loved me. I believe he was a brilliant man and a sick man. I loved him, and I hated him. But the most overwhelming memory of my dad is that I feared him. He had a darkness.
When I play Asphalt Legends Unite, I get that excitement, that adrenaline of trying to cross the finish line first.
Objection, Your Honor, and move to strike.
Overrule.
College was speculation, Your Honor.
Overrule.
Leslie Abramson wouldn't back down, and the judge would reprimand her.
Yeah, somehow it seems that you might be interrupting me just a bit here.
She would keep going, and she would keep going.
You tend to shake your head negatively when the court rules against you.
Yes, I do, Your Honor.
And you had better stop doing that, or the court's going to find you in contempt.
Well, the court may be finding me in contempt pretty soon anyway, because I'm finding the court's rulings astonishingly biased.
It was like a prize fight when you watch those two in the courtroom.
She knew who she represented, and Leslie could care less about whether she made a judge angry or she made the prosecution angry or even reporters.
You want that? That's what you get today.
It was her job to be a warrior.
You want to convict him for his crime? Fine. You want to victimize him more? Not fine. Do you have another question?
Leslie was a fighter and a believer.
I dated Angie Dickinson during that time, and Angie hated the
My boy Larry had a little fine team.
Menendez brothers. Hated everything they stood for to kill their parents. You know, she was law and order Angie. And we had dinner with Leslie Abramson. And Leslie Abramson said at the dinner, "These boys, I would adopt them. That's how much I love them." And Angie kicked me under the table. With a kick, I still feel the pain in the shin with the high heels. She gave me a Schwarzach Shaka mug. But she was very mad at Leslie. But Leslie believed it. Leslie, she did a hell of a job that first trial.
In the early stages of Jose Menendez's seduction of his son, which our experts will tell you is a classic pattern among incestuous males, he told the child that this was their special secret, to be shared with no one.
A couple of years, we moved to Pennington. And I know that my night terrors, the things where it began to manifest inside of me began. It was in Pennington, things had progressed, where he would have me massage him, and I would do so with my mouth. And I remember one time holding my head, and I started to gag, and he forced himself in my mouth, and I got scared. I remember that moment because that was the first time that I really remember feeling fear. And I remember afterwards he kind of rubbed my head and said that, that I did good as a boy.
This is page 41 of my notes. The molestation started at age 6. That was the massages. Then it became sexual at the age of 7, and it involved oral copulation. Then there was intercourse between the ages of 9 and 10.
The first time that he tried to penetrate me, I didn't just feel fear. I wanted to scream inside. I wanted to scream. I remember the moment that things really changed. I was pretty sure I was up 11, and I remember there was an argument that he was having with my mom, and it had become like a violent argument. And I could hear him coming up the stairs. They keep hitting. Open the door, he slammed the door, and he had me get on my knees. He had me full ball sex on it. I remember afterwards he pushed me away, and I started crying. He said, "Why can't you just be more like your brother? Why do you have to cry all the time? Why can't you just be good enough to be a Menendez?" And then he said that you'll get used to it. There was no more.
He said he got in an argument with his mama. He stormed off from the mama, went upstairs in his room, busted the door open, made him get on his knees, and what the fuck? What?
This is something I'm doing because I love you, and because we have a special bond that I don't want anyone to know about. That was no longer a part of what was happening.
It wasn't anything that came up until after the attorneys got a hold of them. They're arrested and lawyers come in, and then the next thing you know, I was abused. It was too pat. It just didn't seem real.
The fact that they didn't report it at the time did not mean that it was a lie. The fact that they were healthy, good-looking, wealthy young men didn't mean that it was a lie. That certainly child sexual abuse happens in every kind of a family.
Children who've been abused oftentimes don't tell because sometimes they don't know that they've been abused until later in their lives. Children tend to trust adults. So at certain times in their development, if they've been abused or punished, they feel that they've done something wrong.
We were taken aback at this revelation of what caused this murder. We even interviewed in New York a girlfriend that Jose had at the time. He was having an affair with another woman, and he was married to a woman.
Having mistresses has nothing to do with being a pedophile. You can have mistresses and still, be sexually inappropriate in other areas of your life.
You know, this is kind of a far-fetched defense. Let's see how this plays out.
But you heard about some of the things that he liked to do to his little boy.
In the media, that's all you would hear, is that these two rich boys killed parents for money. The people who think that did not sit through the same trial that I did.
He raped me.
Did you cry?
Yes.
Gut-wrenching. And then the grief that they shared really between each other, I think was extremely compelling.
I thought the testimony was compelling, just as watching Laurence Olivier act is very compelling as well.
You will have to ask the question, why did she never enter her son's room when Jose Menendez was alone with him?
I think there could have been some abuse. I always tend to think in these high-profile cases that the truth is somewhere in between.
All right, man, we'll go ahead and wrap this one up, man. Y'all go ahead and like, comment, and subscribe. Y'all have a blessed one. See y'all on the next video.